Yes, I think it's something inevitable that's going to come, because if it doesn't come, humanity will almost certainly destroy itself. I don't think it'll destroy the planet, but I think it will destroy itself, because conflict is the inevitable consequence of the materialist paradigm that for the last few hundred years has dominated humanity. But it takes time for a paradigm to change. People used to think that the earth was flat. When was it? 200-300 years BC, it was first suggested that the earth was not flat. But it took centuries for this idea to be accepted. The idea that the sun doesn't go around the earth, but rather the earth goes around the sun. I think that this was suggested several hundred years BC. It took another 1,000 years for Copernicus to enshrine this in the mainstream understanding. These were two massive paradigm shifts that took centuries to be adopted. So people have suggested 2,500 years ago, at the dawn of Western civilization, that there were pre-Socratic philosophers who suggested what I am suggesting now, Parmenides and others, and even before that in the East, 1,000 years before that, this same understanding was being suggested in India and the East. It has taken a long, and many philosophers, both East and West, have suggested this over the centuries. And as you say, there were a whole series of physicists, Max Planck amongst them, who suggested the same. Why are we so slow to take this new possibility, consider this new possibility? Well, I think we are. I think we're witnessing everywhere in society now the breakdown of the old paradigm. We are seeing the inevitable effects of the old paradigm in terms of the extent of the unhappiness that people feel within themselves and the extent of conflict between individuals, communities, and nations on the outside. These are the inevitable consequences of our dualistic, materialistic paradigm. Why do we have this materialistic paradigm? It's simply because we trust the evidence of sense perception. Einstein said common sense, the evidence of the common senses, sense perception, is a series of prejudices that most people acquire by the age of 18. Sense perception does not give us an accurate picture of reality. On the contrary, sense perception filters reality and makes it appear in a way that enables us to function in society. It doesn't give us it's not a window onto reality. It is a filtering of reality. But we forget that, so we believe that the evidence of sense perception, namely that there is something outside consciousness called matter, which in fact gives rise to consciousness. This is nothing has ever actually been experienced outside consciousness. All that is ever experienced is experienced in consciousness. So nobody has ever or could ever come in contact with anything outside consciousness. And yet we have trusted the evidence of sense perception, believed that there is something outside consciousness. I'm not just talking about, when I say consciousness, I don't mean an individual mind. I'm talking about a universal consciousness. We have trusted the evidence of sense perception believe that there is a dead, inert stuff called matter, and moreover, we believe that matter gives rise to consciousness. We believe that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain. But there is a correlation between brain activity and subjective inner experience. That is undeniable. But we make a mistake in presuming, therefore, that brain activity, physical matter, generates or causes consciousness. That is a mistake. And we are, look around you in society, we are paying that. People, individuals pay for this mistake with their happiness. Society pays for it with its sanity.
And this is known as the hard problem of consciousness, isn't it?
The hard problem of consciousness is how does dead inert matter give rise to conscious experience? How could the arrangements of subatomic inert subatomic particles give rise to the feeling of being in love, or tasting tea, or watching a sunset? How does it give rise to consciousness? And of course, it's a false problem, because there is a presumption in the question, namely that dead inert matter does give rise to consciousness. In order to formulate the hard problem of consciousness, how does matter give rise to consciousness, you have to first presume that it does. If we presume that matter gives rise to consciousness, then we have a real problem on our hands. How does it do so? Nobody has any idea at all, even theoretically, as to how this might take place. Well, could it be that the assumption upon which the question is founded is erroneous? The hard problem of consciousness will never be answered because it is a false question. All that we can do is undermine the premise on which the question is based and consider another possibility. Could it be that matter is not fundamental, but consciousness is fundamental? And matter is how the activity of consciousness appears when viewed from a localized perspective, just as the streets of Paris that you dream of at night are the activity of your own mind. But viewed from the perspective of the dreamed character, the streets of Paris don't look like the activity of a great mind. They look like stuff made out of matter. So the activity of the dreamer's mind looks like matter when viewed from a localized perspective. Well, consider the possibility that the universe is what the activity of consciousness looks like when it is perceived from the localized perspective of each of our minds. Another physicist, James Jeans, said the same thing. The more deeply you go into explore the nature of the universe, the more the universe begins to look like the activity of a great mind rather than the workings of a great machine.
And that makes sense, I think. If we think that the 19th century was the century of the machine, and we're definitely getting more away into sort of artificial intelligence and everything like that. So there's probably, to me anyway, that's probably not complete coincidence. In terms of the premise, so this underlying premise that exists, Rupert, in terms of matter gives rise to mind, to consciousness. And we see at the moment in the world all these conflicts taking place. So, for example, in America, if we look at the political systems there, I mean, they've never been as at each other's throats. I mean, it's not unusual, I think, for people on the right to decry people on the left as pretty terrible people, and vice versa. And then if you look back through the 20th centuries, all the different political systems, we've got capitalism through to socialism and all these kind of things. Is it your view then, until the paradigm that you talk about shifts, all of these things are just shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic?
Yes, is the short answer to your question. I'm not suggesting that it's not valid to shuffle the deck chairs. I don't think it's quite like that. There's a value to the changes that we make in society now, in relation to equality and race and health. And these are valid endeavors, even under the existing paradigm. So, but ultimately, these won't make a long-term difference. If there is to be long-term change, we can't just rearrange the furniture. There has to be a paradigm shift. What is that paradigm shift? In relation to politics, for instance, it's very simple. Imagine if all politicians understood that they shared their essential being with everyone. Doesn't mean to say they agree with their thoughts. They can disagree with their thoughts. You and I we might have a disagreement as to whether Federer or Nadal is the best player, or whoever. We could disagree, yeah. But that disagreement tells us nothing about the relationship of our essential being one to the other. We can still have a deep sense of sharing our being, and yet disagree about politics or sports. Now, most people don't just have a disagreement about ideas. Most people feel that their self is different, separate from everybody else's self. And if they feel they share their being, their self, it's usually a very small circle, that their family and their friends. So they feel one with their family and friends. But there's a line for everyone, for most of us. It's a grey area, but there's a line beyond which everyone else is other. People on this side of the line are one with myself. I love them. I would never do anything to harm them. Why? Because I feel that if I harm them, I harm myself. We don't harm our child because we are one with our child. If our child is hurting and upset, we feel upset. Why? Because we feel that their being is our being. What happens to them happens to us. So we would never, under normal, except for very, very rare occasions, but we would never, very, very rare people, we would never do anything to knowingly hurt someone we love. That is someone we feel one with. Well, why do we feel one with some? Does it make sense that our being is one with some people and a few animals, our dog and our cat, but not with everybody else? It's irrational. If being is one, it is one. If it is many, in which case we are separate from everyone, including our own children. But we don't feel that. So that the paradigm shift is simply the felt understanding that we share our being with everyone and everything. What kind of a world would we live in if our politicians, the heads of our institutions, our teachers, parents, all of us felt this, just this simple, and we acted in a way that was consistent, to the best of our ability, with this understanding. So it's not it's not. And sometimes during this conversation, we've gone down a pathway. It might seem complex. It can get complex if you begin to explore the ideas behind it. But actually, what is being said is very simple. Really, two things. If we were to take all the world's great religious and spiritual traditions and distill them into a single sentence, it would read something like this: that the nature of our being is happiness, and our being is shared with everyone and everything. That's it. That's all we need to know. If we understood this, if we felt this, and if we led a life that was consistent with this understanding, society would be transformed. And this understanding is well within everybody's capability. It's not necessary to read sophisticated books on philosophy. It's not necessary to subscribe to any religious or spiritual tradition. It's not necessary to go on. This is just a simple, easy to understand. The very nature of our own being is effortlessness, peace, joy. And what we essentially are is the same as what everyone and everything else essentially is. That's it. It's all that is necessary to understand. And then to lead a life to the best of our ability in a way that is consistent with and an expression of this understanding.